Our next and final panel of the day is our Thought Leaders panel. Brian Kelly from CNBC will be your moderator, and he's brought with him Jim Robinson of RRE Ventures, Matthew Roszak of Tally Capital, Sam Cole of KnCMiner, Jamie Smith of BitFury, and Tim O'Donnell from PwC. So you guys are in for a real treat. Thanks.
Yeah, start.
All right. All right. Well, we have quite a group here today, and we have quite a challenge ahead of us. Our panel is, what do they title it? How blockchain can save industry, government, and the world. So we have 45 minutes, everybody.
Let's save the
world. Maybe 30 minutes, because we want to leave some room for questions, and we're going to save the world in this time. So without further ado, let me just go through each panelist, introduce yourself quickly, and then we'll kind of get into the discussion. So Tim, why don't we start with you?
Tim O'Donnell with PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC. For the last 10 years previous to that, spent time in industry and in the software startup world. But throughout that time, a consistent theme is clearing and settling of different assets, mostly cash, but in recent years, non-cash assets, and was able to get involved with this new technology called blockchain a couple of years ago, and have been working with financial institutions looking at the parallels between blockchain capabilities and the pain points that are in our financial services industry today.
Hi everyone, Sam from KnC in Stockholm, Sweden. We are an old Bitcoin company. We are coming up to 3. We've been around since the early days, I guess I can say now. So we are effectively a Bitcoin miner. We build these massive mega data centers in the Arctic Circle.
Jim Robinson, a co-founder of RRE Ventures, a venture capital firm headquartered in New York. We've been active fintech investors for a couple of decades. Since late 2013, have made about a dozen investments in and around the blockchain and Bitcoin space. We actually spent a bunch of time 20 years ago looking at the forerunners of this in companies like DigiCash, but active in all parts of the stack and mostly geographically in and around the United States, but some overseas as well.
Hi, my name is Matthew Roszak. Been a venture capitalist for most of my career. Also started 5 enterprise software companies and been pretty focused on this ecosystem for the last 3 years and investing in a lot of wallets, payment processors, miners, exchanges, and a lot of the on-ramps, off-ramps of this ecosystem. And late last year, founded a company with Jeff Garzik called Bloq in the enterprise blockchain software space. I'm also on the board of advisors for the Chamber. I'm on the board of BitGive, first philanthropic organization in Bitcoin, and also was a producer of the Rise and Rise of Bitcoin. So if you guys want a good primer on the Bitcoin ecosystem, it's downloadable on iTunes. It's a good start from a documentary standpoint.
Can I buy it with Bitcoin?
There's a site where you could do that on.
Okay, I only buy things with Bitcoin after today.
Good luck.
I'm Jamie Smith. I'm the Global Chief Communications Officer for BitFury, and I have no idea what any of these people are talking about. I joke, but honestly, I'm very new to this world. I started in this position about 4 months ago, and really took a leap of faith into something that I've come to really believe in and see the power of. I served as Special Assistant to the President and spokesperson at the White House. I was Chief Communications Officer for the intelligence community. I worked in the Senate on the Senate Intelligence and Commerce Committees. I've worked as a spokesperson for Hillary and Secretary Albright and all sorts of exciting other adventures in my life. So this, I think, is by far the nuttiest thing I've ever done, and also somehow seems not nutty at all, and really just extremely exciting with every day that I learn more and more.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think, and probably for everybody in this room, I mean, getting into this space is one of the nuttier things that we've all done in our life, and it brought us all here together. So let's start saving the world, but let's start with industry first. So, as I sat out there today, I listened to a lot of people talking about different use cases and how we can go about it. But what struck me was that it seems to be we're at this kind of inflection point where where industry and really financial services might be at the point of replacing their Oracle database with a blockchain, right? And maybe that's where we are. So I thought I'd start with Matt and kind of get your thoughts on that. Do you think that the industry is at that point, or is that something that's 5-10 years down the line?
I think you have it right. It's a blockchain is a fancy database. It's a super database. And you look at the last 3 years of headlines, Bitcoin has had very negative connotations to it. And last year, you're seeing every household name bank jumping on this blockchain train. And they're very purposeful. They see the benefits of this underlying technology, but they also are in one of the most regulated industries in the world. It's called money. And so they have to be careful of KYC, AML, and movement of that money. And so instead of going on this public blockchain called Bitcoin, they're saying, let's not go into that ocean. Let's build our own private pool, and let's make sure we have identified parties around the pool. And you start building efficiencies when you're on this private database, this private chain, where identity, credit risk, balance sheet exposure, all this stuff starts to compress and make it much more efficient to move value across a particular ecosystem, a particular network. And so right now it's going to go through some phases, going from public to private, and then they're going to get all these efficiencies. Santander Bank said that the next 5 years, half decade, about $20 billion of costs are going to come out of the system by the use of private blockchains, and that makes sense. And you're going to process and streamline workflows within these big banks and intrabanks. The next level, and this could be a decade or two away, is when these networks start becoming open again. And what parts of those networks become open, and what workflows and identities mechanisms allow for that. And that's kind of the phase 2 or even 3 out of this. But the first step is embracing this technology and trying to figure out how to harness it within their own ecosystems.
So, Tim, from your perspective, are you seeing any type of change? What's your thoughts on this?
It is a fascinating phenomena when you consider that the banking industry is taking technology that was purpose-built to obviate them, that had many key features that are completely contrary, diametrically opposed to some of the pillars of financial services, and are now trying to keep the best parts of that, the elegant simplicity, the genius that was in the design of this original blockchain, and now morph it into something that is, lack of a better term, FS-friendly, financial services friendly. And they have an opportunity to take something that was developed on a blank sheet of paper to do something that we would all like to do at different points of our life when we're asked, if you had to do it all over again, would you do it this way? And I think that phrase was used earlier today by Blythe and by Bill Hartnett. But we're at that point now where we're trying to salvage the best parts of this and add the bits on that is going to make it acceptable to the financial services community, and yet at the same time build out a business case for implementing this and replacing a lot of the proprietary siloed databases that make the industry run today.
So then that would bring me to you, Jim. So it sounds as if there is an inflection point. If I'm Oracle, if I'm Larry Ellison, do I need to be worried that this is that disruptive?
I would say the answer is they are already watching it carefully. There are, and there are different aspects within, actually Oracle is a specific example. There are a number of different departments that have their own different takes on this. There are better use cases and worse use cases as it relates to whether or not all FSs, FIs should adopt this. But for anything that's transactional, that's a nearer term bogey, in that when you've got multi-parties, particularly if they're intramural but outside as opposed to within an enterprise, they're going to have a lot of incentives to develop or to work with a multi-entry point or database that's contained but that allows for others to view and write and read. So absolutely, they've got their time focused on it, and I wouldn't be surprised. Oracle being Oracle, I think sometime by end of this year, early next, they'll start forecasting that they've got this, right. And 9 months later they may actually have it. ready for deployment. But yeah, they're coming into this space.
And that would be a private, permissioned, whatever we want to call it, blockchain? Is that what we're thinking?
So I think initially, particularly in and around industries that are regulated, financial services being an obvious example of that, you're going to see the privates that are going to be the first ones. They'll be intramural, bank to bank, replacements for SWIFT, if you're talking about that kind of thing, wiring, this sort of thing, you'll see amongst what I call club patterns. So, us six bags were part of a steering committee somewhere, we decide we'll adopt this specific process. Yeah, there's no question that the majors are going to be players in that. And meanwhile, though, you're going to have consultants that are going to be choosing best of breed. They're going to be looking for the best solutions, which may differ in terms of what fits this particular application versus another.
So then, all right, so let me come to Sam then, because you're mining the public ledger,
Yes,
right?
indeed.
So private ledgers, public ledgers, are they a threat to your business? Are miners going to be out of business, or can we coexist? Can we have both a public and a private existing?
So we sell security services to private chains.
Okay.
And so it's a different business model for us, but essentially when your chain needs to be secured by something as simple as proof of work, you need to have that security. I know lots of people don't like the public chains. It can be secured from anywhere in the world. They want a private chain that they know where it's being secured, so that the miner actually becomes regulated. The hardware that we use becomes regulated. And so we sell security services to effectively private chains.
Okay. So the miners of the world then are now moving on just beyond mining service, beyond just getting the reward from mining Bitcoin and diversifying their organization.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, a long time ago, we realized that mining is great, but there's so many other revenue opportunities out there, and us as being in the heart of it since basically the very beginning, we've got a wealth of knowledge that the rest of the community are learning.
I have a question, though, on this. So is the belief, and sorry, I don't mean to take over your job
No,
here,
feel free. Listen, I'll sit back. Go ahead.
As the newbie, but also somebody who works for a miner, so there's the same guarantee for the private blockchain in security as there is in the public?
No.
Right.
It's real simple. There's not. There are, what we got now, 1.2 sextillion calculations a second that you've got to beat if you want to delay a transaction by 10 minutes. And that's just a delay one. If you want to go back 20 minutes, you're going to need, 100 times more power than that. I mean, very quickly, the sun runs out of energy if you want to go back far enough.
Right.
It is unbelievable the amount of security that we've got in the public chain. However, if the private chain is unconnectable to the outside, all you've got to do is secure it to the inside of your building. So if you're a bank and you put one of your servers providing security, well, if your IT department get upset with you, they've got two servers, they can destroy your chain. So you basically rent a container. You rent another security service to secure your own chain for internal issues, not for external.
Notion of trusted versus trustless.
Yeah, and
three or four or
internal security threats.
Right.
And then there's a future where you have a constellation of chains where certain private chains will have to hash a particular set of data into a public chain so their third-party auditors can look at something outside of that chain. And so you see some interplay there between public and private.
So
And we're already starting to hear concerns as people look into the not-so-distant future. If there are dozens, hundreds, potentially hundreds of thousands of for-purpose blockchains out there, aren't we, at that point, back in the same position we are today? Siloed, proprietary, and not integrated databases.
Sorry, that's why I like what Matt was saying. I would amend it slightly. In my hopes is that we don't. I think BitFury's position, and certainly mine, is that I like that everybody is pursuing these private blockchains, but I hope that at the same time, on a parallel track, that the public blockchain remains the place that people see for the full security, and then that it's not all blockchain and then back to public.
So Jim, what your thoughts? You're investing. You're in this space. Do you have a preference then? Public companies that are building for the public chain versus a private chain. Does it matter to you?
So it does matter. I'm interested in both, and I'm an investor in companies that are on both sides of that structure. It's reminiscent of other periods in technology cycles where, people saw an interesting new promising series of technologies and the enterprises, and particularly in regulated businesses, would wrestle with the idea of, I like that, but I can't have it exposed. I mean, we don't talk about so much anymore, ideas like VPNs and tunneling and all of that. So all of that existed and came about because people wanted their own behind the firewall versions in enterprise. And so we're seeing that again. And it is a natural reaction. And there will be applications where that makes total sense, where you don't have the mining worry and therefore the issue of do you have the 12 nines of security that we can actually offer within the Bitcoin topology, and those will be fine. But it comes down to the use case. And when you think of some of the larger problems that one needs to solve, and there are incidentally some areas where this makes no sense at all, and it's just a slow distributed database. But in those where it makes sense, and you're looking for security, and you have a lot of open access points, rather than trying to recreate a world with tunneling and VPN technologies and permissioning and passwording and all of that, this is a fantastic solution away from that. So I'm more interested long-term in solving that latter category, and many of our investments, probably the majority, are aimed at doing that. But there are certainly companies that we've seen where we love the people, we think that they've got a gift for what they're building, and they speak the lingua franca of large organizations, primarily FIs, financial institutions, and that's interesting too.
I can give a quick comparison, if you like, about technology. In the late 70s or early 80s, there was a protocol created called SMTP. Does anyone know what SMTP is?
Yep.
Yeah. Simple Mail Transfer Protocol. It basically started there. I spent the next 15 years of my career writing mail gateways, interacting between private mail services. We no longer do that. Everybody is back to where they started on SMTP.
So is that where you think we end up with is there, like, we have, not to get too technical, but we have the Lightning Network, right? So they're talking about perhaps having these side chains and merging. Is that where we end up with this?
Most likely, yes. For the what we call the public chains.
Yeah,
Right.
I also believe the dynamic here is about interoperability over time, and and sometimes the best network, like TCP/IP, was not necessarily the best protocol at the time, but it got the most network effect. And so people started innovating and codifying, and that became the calloused blood vessel for the internet. And so SMTP, voice over IP, all these different protocols, once the network effect flywheel starts turning, much like we have in Bitcoin, it's the most invested blockchain on the planet. We'll see innovations in private blockchains, but that interoperability, you can't foresee it. You could say, hey, it's going to be a multi-token, multi-chain, multi-node world, but how we're going to get there and what that's going to look like over time, it's still very fuzzy.
So actually, that's perfect. Let's come to Jamie. In terms of as we go forward, when we all started in this, and as we all said, Bitcoin had a negative connotation. What is the message that government needs to hear from the blockchain community, and what message should the blockchain community be sending out there? Do we need to change it, or are we okay on the path we are to meet all these challenges that we're going to go through?
We need to change it. Big time. So I actually think that in almost 20 years that I've been doing this, I've come to realize that my actual talent in life is purely just taking complicated things and trying to explain them to my family and maybe your family. And it's really like what I do. And thankfully there are people out there who want to pay me to do that. So I fundamentally believe that there are 3 ways that you could probably get people, particularly in this town, but I think other major hubs around the world, to understand this. And the language that people here speak is about security. And I think that we could really talk about this in a much different way and get a lot of folks who are in positions of power and, frankly, in some cases, positions to cause a great deal of unintended harm on progress by explaining this to them in a security prism. The other way I think you could really affect change is by explaining this to them in a world-changing prism. There are a lot of folks in this town, and especially, who will never need to understand this technology. And we should not have the expectation that we want them to understand this technology at its core. There are people in this room who were put on this earth to understand these types of technological breakthroughs. most people do not understand this, and that's got to be okay. We have to welcome them in the door, and I think blockchain is the way to do that. But I think explaining this, to me, it's the equivalent, and I'm cribbing this off of many people who have said this to me, of in the 90s, if we'd walked in and said, hey, let me tell you about HTML. If you'd said that to, let's say, Madeleine Albright, she would have been like, I don't know what you're talking about. But if you went into her office and said, I want to talk to you about this thing, it's called the internet, and it's literally going to change the world, people start listening. And so I think the broader you can go and the more you can focus on impact, the better off we're going to be. I also would say that I think that there is just some language that we might want to ditch. There's some words that actually not only are they make no sense, but they're like kind of hurting the cause. One of them I would say, and I might get fired for this, is minor. It's like completely unhelpful. It doesn't actually explain what's happening, and it really distracts people. So there's a lot of different, I would just say two other quick things. One is when I started thinking about whether to take this job and dive into this world, I looked at all these YouTube videos and all of these different decks, and what became very clear to me is that there is literally almost nothing on earth that exists right now that can explain this to regular people. So we ought to kind of work on that as a community. The second thing I would end with is that as a community, I think that I'm hoping that you will let me make it part of my job to work with all of you to actually come up with this sort of coalition messaging with a couple of my friends over here, Melton. We're going to really commit ourselves to trying to actually shape this and work together as a coalition to come up with some of this a little bit more fine-tuned and approachable language.
Great initiative, great segue, and I too am one of those people who tend to take complicated things and try to explain it, and it's the reason why I wrote a book on Bitcoin, because I spent about 48 hours trying to explain to my wife why I was so obsessed with Bitcoin. Right. And after 48 hours, I said, you know what, I'm going to write a book for her. And so that ended up 6 months later with the book. But great segue into the use cases, because I think this is the coolest part. And this is, I promised you, we are going to save the world. This is how we're going to save the world. So I wanted to start with Tim, because we talked in the green room about some kind of just cool use cases for blockchain. So why don't we start off with what you guys are doing in the charity space?
Yeah, what we were talking about is not within the realm of financial services strictly, but it does fit into the topic of blockchain's contribution to the betterment of humanity, if you will. And I don't mean this as an advertisement for PwC in any way, but we are drinking the Kool-Aid. We're developing our own blockchain technologies within the firm. One of them that has gotten some attention has to do with the fact that, as a firm, we do pro bono work in the event of a natural disaster. We are the project managers, we are the accountants for the flow of money from various contributors to the needy on location. And it's a difficult, time-consuming job that a bunch of accountants happen to be good at. But what we're doing is applying this technology to that business problem by tokenizing every dollar or euro or yen that comes into the relief effort. And by tracking the provenance of that money from the contributor through our hands to contractors, to individuals, to charities that are on locations, we can audit ourselves, but also allow other people visibility into where those funds are going. That in itself is a benefit, mostly to PwC, but also to the people on the street who get more of the money in a more timely basis. But we've also realized that it could conceivably increase the amount of money coming into that system. The lack of trust in the provenance of the cash in traditional systems is very high, and therefore people are reluctant to contribute. If we had a transparent, immutable, shared database of exactly where every dollar, if you will, went, then the feeling is that the contribution levels would increase. So we're taking a technology that you wouldn't think would have a direct impact on society and using it for what we think is the greater good.
Perfect, save the world. Now, Sam, you were talking about perhaps a way to explain blockchain with voting, correct?
Yes.
And perhaps potentially use case for that. Let's hear a little bit about that.
Sure. I mean, this audience may be a bit more educated in blockchain than I'm used to speaking to. But if one thing, you can take this use case and you can take the message forward. Give it to the guys who you speak to. It's a very clear, easy way to do it. It goes like this. Hands up, who has voted? Okay, ready? Good, lots of you. Hands up if you know with certainty that your vote was counted. There's no hands up, right? It's really that simple. It's the power that we have in democratic society, and yet we cannot prove we've done it. If I could show you a technology where you and only you, and that's important, only you, would be able to see that your individual vote was counted, would you like it? Mm-hmm. Be quite cool, right? Now, what about if we sold this to a bunch of governments? We've got the Germans, the Italians, the French, the Swiss, the Swedish government. They all said, we love it, we're going to implement it right now, the next election. It's going to go this way. But the US government refused.
What?
Would you then trust the US government? No. Yet that's the situation we have today, right? That's how revolutionary this technology is. And I don't need any fancy words about it. It literally brings the power to see what's happened into the users of the system. It is not behind some firewall in an organization that may or may not have auditing. No, no, no. You do it yourself. And there'll be hundreds of websites, media probably sponsoring lots of them, where you can see your vote inside their system, and only you will know it's you. That's blockchain.
Just a second.
Yeah.
So there's this wonderful guy, if you haven't met him yet, hopefully you will. His name's Tamika Tilleman, and he was the head of the, I don't know, I'm going to get this wrong, but like the Democracy Promotion Civil Society unit at the State Department under Hillary. And he's now at the New America Foundation, and we've been working with him, BitFury, and on a democracy of the blockchain program, which we'd love a lot of people to get involved in. And we were talking about this issue, right? Because it would be perfect if we could actually show how this works, but it's really hard to find a case, I should have said Brian Ford is also working with us on this, to find a case where if it goes wrong, you haven't somehow negatively impacted democracy, right? You haven't like hurt an election cycle and then everybody freaks out. And so a couple of ideas were maybe we could actually have a vote at the Community of Democracies or at the UN or something where, I don't mean to imply that the vote there wouldn't be consequential, but it wouldn't determine the leadership of another, of that country. And I think that there's some cool... FIFA. That's a wonderful idea. That's a great idea. But,
well, at least we're going to save the world of soccer or football. There we go.
But all jokes aside, if we really could find a couple of institutions where people could experience it, but it wouldn't be like...
I think the first use cases are the University Students' Union presidents. That's basically where it starts. It starts really down at the nice lower level. It's not going to destroy the world if that one goes wrong. It's a good trial, and it will happen there. But very quickly, the network effect comes in. And if you're not using this technology, if it's available and proven, then there is something wrong with you. That's the message. It's the network effect.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yep. Jim, what kind of things are you seeing out there that are cool use cases? And we talked a little bit about there is a difference between the first world use case and the third world use case, right? Right now, if I can, if Bitcoin helps me buy Starbucks a little easier, all right, maybe it makes me feel cool that I did it, but it's not changing my life. But in the third world, and I think this goes to the voting, what are you seeing out there that those use cases that could really make a big impact?
Yeah, I mean, the value isn't that we don't have to do this anymore, we do this. In other words, the first world Starbucks purchase. There are some great and very compelling first world use cases, and we invest in some of those. We also look at and invest in some that have more of an overseas second and third world focus. I mean, here, if you think about it, so here's an example in my home state. I live in New York State, and if you spend time with our Attorney General there, Eric Schneiderman, he will tell you that despite the headlines about sword fighting with Airbnb or being asked about Uber, even though it's not within his purview, or some other issues, he will tell you the number one issue and time consumer at 200 inbounds a week is the staffing that he has to go through for where's my title, where's my house title. The home title, New York, 20-some-odd million people in the whole state, and you've got an inbound of 200 a week, every week, week in and week out. Does the bank have it? Do I have it? Some of those are zombie properties, most are not. Most are literally perfectly fair, valid, I don't know where it is. Now, leaving aside for a minute all of the other issues with title insurance and clearing and establishing what amounts to provenance on a property, there is an example of a blockchain waiting to happen in a first world use case. Asset ownership as represented in a digital stream as opposed to with a physical piece of paper. And you can apply that to car titles, and you can apply it to art if you're worried about provenance, and many other things. Those can be first, second, or by the way, in the third world, they won't ever know another system. That's how they will do it, to the extent that the title's ownership confirmation in a digital stream as opposed to a physical piece of paper. Now, in the third world, you've got a completely different series of possibilities. I mean, you're talking about not just unbanked or underbanked, but unbanked. People have no access whatsoever. The obvious cases, everybody's talked about the Argentinian peso and, 20% one year, 30% lost the next. Those are the easy to spot ones. But for somebody that's never had access, some sort of a peer-to-peer model, we're talking primarily very small denominations. These are not denominations that you're employing 3 people to go and investigate. I mean, in some cases, it's a handful of pesos. And this is a life changer, not just in their ability to dodge whatever regime is there, may impose on them in terms of taxation or, devaluing the currency, but just in the ability to participate in the first place. That can get very complex very quickly. If I'm in Indonesia and I'm a farmer, am I hedging wheat? I have a wheat product. Am I able to hedge that in some way? So the complexity can grow dramatically, but the use cases do differ a great deal by geography and by stage of development. There's no question about that.
It's interesting. Goldman Sachs did a report about 6 months ago or so where they talked to millennials, and about 50% of the millennials said in 5 years they will not need a bank. And what I took away from that was that they are voluntarily unbanked, and it's a whole group of people that are saying we're going to be voluntarily unbanked. So Matt, let me bring it to you. What are you seeing out there? Is there anything that we could take from the third world use cases that you're seeing that's cool, that maybe even would apply to the millennial generation and the unbanked?
I think one of the greatest use cases of blockchain technology is identity. And so how many of you have gone to Target to buy a pack of gum with a credit card, and they ask you for your driver's license, and you feel completely violated that they have way too much information for buying a pack of gum? I mean, it's kind of crazy. And so blockchain technology, you could have partitioned identity. And so if you go into Target, I'm just executing that transaction, walk out with a pack of gum. You go into a bar or a liquor store, you're over 21, that's all they know. They don't know that you're a Sagittarius and you live in this zip code. There's none of that. It's partition-based information for that transaction. If you're getting a mortgage, different set of data. Going to a hospital, different set of data. Get a job, et cetera, et cetera. And so that unlocks a lot of dynamics when you even go into third world countries on a philanthropic basis, so you know where it's going. So you have identified entities, individuals, machines. That identity component of this really lubricates the commerce piece of this a lot better.
And another example of that is one that I've heard, I don't know a lot about, but I fell in love with the idea, and it is to decrease the potential for human trafficking. And the people who do this try to wipe out the identity of the people that they are taking across borders. Technology that is around facial recognition and using even old-style fingerprints, you can hash that, put it on a blockchain, and prove the identity of someone, even if they were to be moved to a different part of the world. And all you really need is a picture of them and tie it back to their original identity if you can capture it at some point earlier in time. So,
earlier peer-to-peer came up, and this was described as, this is one of the risk layers, and it is and can be. On the other hand, if you were to look at just the U.S. remittance handle, it's about $600 billion. It depends a little bit on what you count. It can be as high as $750. That's per annum. Something like 75 to 80% of those transactions are below a few $100s. So this is, Esther or Larry sending money home on a regular basis. It's fairly predictable. They're doing it through very, very high-priced, high-walled, difficult-to-use systems today. And by the way, that's just the U.S. experience. The experience they have in country is dramatically worse. Mm-hmm. So here's an example of, do you really care? If it's $200 a month going to the family home, it's probably not interesting. We don't need a SWAT team to investigate it. So what we do, of course, in the U.S. today is we do it by dollar amount. But that's an example that touches both first and third world, and second, in all of them, in very meaningful ways. And is it just a much better system. There is no way that you can argue on any level, whether it's security or intelligence or anything, that it is better to not do it this way than it would be to do it.
It's better to do it this way because of the transparency.
Because of the transparency, because of the convenience, because that somebody, if you're in Mexico and you're receiving a remittance, first of all, the average person is taking a bus. They may be able to go to the OXO, which is kind of their 7-Eleven, but probably not. They probably have to go to what amounts to a Western Union front. And they used to call it Kosh Point Tuesdays. That meant that Tuesday mornings, many people would go, because that's when a lot of workers are paid on Mondays, and literally the cottage industry of criminals waits near the locations because they know people are coming out with money. And so Kosh meaning hit them over the head.
Right.
And that sounds terrible, but that actually is still circa 2016 the world in lots of places. And it gets worse than that. So here are examples that are that cross over from first to second to third world, but are just better systems. And having a peer-to-peer topology in that allows you to avoid all of that. If you're my neighbor, I live across the street or across the road or across the path or in the next tree over, I can still, because you know what I do have today? A device. Mm-hmm. Maybe your feature phone, they'll all be smartphones in 2 or 3 years, even there. But I have a device. And so I can actually be the deliverer to you and you to me. And so there's the topology that just is a no-brainer and is better.
Right.
The big transaction is different. You have to be able to vet those, follow them, see where they go.
Yep. I want to leave a little bit of time for questions too, but I wanted to end, or at least give Jamie a chance. If there's some inspiring entrepreneurs out there or people that are working within an industry that want to get the attention of Washington, what path would you say, whether it be a particular product that would get them in the door into their congresspersons, senators, or further up in the door there, or the product or path that people here in Washington would most be receptive to?
It's a really good question, and trying to sort of tie in your other question with that. I think that you're most effective in Washington if you are working together. And that is why the Digital Chamber of Commerce and KnCMiner are so important, and all of us need to work with them, because if you can walk in the door as a collective with a point of view that you can represent, I mean, it doesn't mean everybody in the room has to agree, but if you come in divided, then the people on the other end of the table are annoyed. You're wasting their time. They want you to come in with a joint opinion and something that you're pushing, and then it's much more transactional than you maybe even want to believe, but people are busy, so they want to know, what do you need from me? How are you guys all together on this? And then I will take that to my boss and figure out how we can get that done for you. And if we can't, we'll come back, and if we can, we'll come back. And it's back and forth and back and forth. And I think that as a collective unit, we need to come in with a message, with a clear message, that we want you to understand this, and this is what we want you to do. We're not against regulation, but we want this kind of regulation and not this. And make it safe for them to embrace all of this. And it's less about your product than it is about the industry. We want, if there's a feeling that it's a dangerous industry, bad things can happen with legislators who don't know anything about what you're selling them. If they feel like, oh, you're offering me security and the possibility of changing the world, and I think on the use cases point, I would just say that my husband and I both have worked in the national security world. He's still at the Pentagon. We could literally wallpaper our kitchen, at least one part of it, with the amount of letters from an agency called OPM. If you're not familiar, it's the Office of Personnel Management. The letters saying, so sorry, all of your secret information has been hacked. Here's the letter saying, we know that happened. Good luck to you. And I think I have like 6 letters over the years that tell me this. And you're kind of stuck with like, oh, that's terrible. Now they know that, I smoked cigarettes when I was 13. But it's a problem. And I think that one of the best ways to approach the government, and we always think about Capitol Hill, but let's go to OPM. Let's go together and show them how they could actually help catalog all this information in a much more secure way. Let's go to the Pentagon, where there's a zillion records that they don't know how to keep organized. Let's go to the VA and help them with that. I think if we can actually show within the impact of this technology, it will be a much more integrated part of the way that government functions, and then, of course, it will seem safer.
Perfect. Let's grab a couple questions.
So I'm not from Norensic. We are actually an artificial intelligence startup. So we use AI to detect trade surveillance, to do trade surveillance and detect market manipulation. We anticipate that both will still be present on the blockchain. We're not fully sure how. And today's conference actually helped, advance our thinking a lot more and gives a lot more clarity. So thanks to the Chamber of Digital Commerce in Georgetown for setting us up, and thanks for everyone for showing up. So I guess my question is, so AI is another disruptive technology that has a lot of hype behind it and a lot of promise behind it, and the promise to kind of remake the world. What is your point of view on how AI will live on the blockchain?
Jim, that sounds like something for you.
So, yeah, it is the third time I've seen AI become hot. And by the way, I think third time's a charm. And what I mean by that is we're finally good enough, and the algorithms, I think, are refined enough to have great utility. There are some second-gen versions that weren't bad. Specifically to here, I mean, a lot of what AI is good at, and it's a broad category, but is patterning and finding, and not just the obvious patterning that we can do, but the inobvious, the sort of the correlations and the causalities that we can't see today, or that we can see but only in limited ways, that you could then forecast from, use that as some information that allows you to figure out something in the future. So, I mean, what we're talking about here is value transfer, and in the world today, value transfer, a lot of the value for all kinds of very legitimate intelligence reasons is specific to are bad things happening or good things happening, or how do we distinguish? AI, much like our what I call a cottage industry of fraud detection, where we have to keep adding a zero to that every 10 years, and it isn't sustainable. This goes to that. So its ability to make those decisions on the fly, is this a transaction that is credible, that is that should be allowed or not? Or by the way, if you're seeing a pattern of runs that are going to a specific kind of a place of value transfer, what does that mean? Well, today we brute force this. We look at it, we see it. It pops up in exception management, usually a screen pop, and then we've got to sort of have a bunch of gray matter try to interpret what's going on. In tomorrow's world, a lot of that will be handled by machines. There will be accidents that happen, bad things and good things, and probably some hilarious ones. But I'm bullish on the combination of the two. AI is not a vertical industry. It's a horizontal series of applications.
Interesting.
Hello, I'm Liz Robbins. I'm a third-year law student at Cardozo Law in New York City, and I'm here representing the Cardozo Tech Startup Clinic. And at the clinic, I'm doing a policy paper with my colleague Dana, applying blockchain technology to state government. And so something that I would love to hear more about is the potential for blockchain technology to kind of cure a lot of the inefficiencies that exist between government agencies, not just on the federal level, but on the state level, and how maybe government could use blockchain, for itself with, agency to agency communication, things like that.
You want to take a crack at that?
I'll take a crack. I think, it reminds me of, shockingly, during healthcare.gov, Kentucky emerged as like the state that everybody looked at as like the use case and the test of like maximum efficiency. And it was sort of shocking to everybody. Like, how could Kentucky, who seemingly, there's like one person there who likes President Obama, be, kind of turn into the state that people are looking at? And I think it wouldn't hurt, sort of in the use case scenario, to find a state that is maybe a little counterintuitive, but also representative of a larger community and a diverse community, and potentially, hopefully, that has like a governor that's a little bit interested in thinking out of the box, and approaching them and saying, hey, would you be interested in working with us to see if we can try and apply these 3 issues to the blockchain and see what kind of effect it could have? And I think it would be really neat to see if a state like maybe Colorado would be interested in something like that. I think Governor Hickenlooper is like a very thoughtful guy who may want to try some of that out, or a state that people could look at and say, huh, maybe that is, and then they can actually show how it saved money, because that's really big.
Yeah, I have a use case we've been working on. It's primarily born out of Europe, but it actually has impact here as well. The U.S. government lose $500 billion a year to tax fraud. Most of it is actually sales tax fraud, and we have a way that we can put sales tax on the blockchain. the money no longer moves around, but the contractual obligation does. And so it gets netted out, meaning that the governments no longer have to fund it by giving tax credits to businesses, thus immediately saving $500 billion a year. That's got to be worth it. That same tax fraud in Europe is 170 billion pounds, as British pounds, so it's about $250,000. It's just because the governments have to send the money. It would be much easier if they sent a contractual obligation on a piece of paper. Put on the chain, save it all.
I should have said from the start, if you actually want people in Washington to listen, show them the money.
$500 billion.
It's a lot of money.
One usage case, right?
That starts adding up.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
Hi, guys. My name is Carlos Barksdale. I'm actually one of the scholarship recipients.
Okay.
Gotcha. I'm actually one of the scholarship recipients for today's summit, so thank you, guys. This question is directed towards Jim Robinson. You've made some really good points today advocating blockchain and Bitcoin technology. And as a VC investor, I'm kind of curious, what was like the aha moment for you and your team where you guys decided to like put money behind these ideas and to fund them? And even after like those initial investments, what were some of your skepticisms like going in?
Yeah, no, listen, a great question. And, you know, listen, I'm in the business of, for every 10 investments, 6 of them aren't going to go that great. So there's a lot of risk. I would say that having invested in various forms of financial technology for a couple of decades, and the reason why we looked at it so early was because we were looking for ways to do things both faster, cheaper, and better, meaning, you know, within the existing systems, but also to do things that you couldn't otherwise do, and that's sort of the networking topology. And until we had an internet, a series of internets and networks around the world that were linked, many of the things that we're talking about today simply weren't possible. You just couldn't do them. You could do certain pieces of them better. So that's how it started. That was the backdrop. The first couple of aha moments, if you will, were really about being in the 1.0 version of mobile payments. So we invested in several companies that did that. And whether that's in remittances, where I spent 10 years battling a bunch of different systems in multiple countries, both, you know, regulatory, but also just, you know, the inbred distribution systems. There is an example of a case that is, you can do it both faster, better, cheaper, but you can also do things you couldn't do before. So when Bitcoin finally reached a maturation point to where we could see the ability to do things differently than we used to, and in the near term, that's what made it interesting. We start most every area and we invest by saying, what's the world look like in 5 to 10 years? And this was a, you know, what do we think 2018, 2020, a few years ago now, will look like? And what will 2030 look like? And will people carry money? Will they not carry money? And then you sort of have to back up from there what has to happen if you're going to reach that position.
Perfect. So I think that's it. I just wanted to, thank Perry Ann. Great conference. And also, and thank you to the panel. Some really great insights, and you really treated everybody to a good 45 minutes. So thank you very much.
Thank you to the Thought Leaders panel.